So what are you up to these days, training-wise?
Training-wise, got back in the groove a little bit this week, getting ready for starting to prep for 2017. Done some dug in, had to have a little tough conversation with myself and analyze and kind of evaluate where I was in my journey as a triathlete and where I needed to actually, if my current abilities and time and goals, if they actually matched up to where I wanted to go. And it's funny, I was actually doing some goals for next year and telling Allie about it. I was like, I kind of had to have a tough conversation with myself. Do I think I'll actually be ready to, qualify, for KONA next year? And the answer is no. I don't think that with the time frame that I have and professional responsibilities and, with the newborn, honestly, it's probably going to be like a 3-year journey because I've already committed to not doing an Ironman next year. I'm going to really focus on the short distance, 70.3. I do have a goal to qualify for 70.3 Worlds in Chattanooga. That's something I feel like I can accomplish. And then do an Ironman late 2018. Either Louisville, Wisconsin again, Arizona. Who knows? By 2018, it'll probably be like 6 or 7 more full distance Ironman available. So I'm really just kind of have my pick of the litter, and doing one late enough in the year to where I would qualify for KONA the next year. So I'm really looking at a 3-year kind of cycle. Qualify hopefully in 2 years, be able to do it the 3rd year, which would be kind of neat. I think that gives me enough time. It is a big financial commitment as well. I don't want to be one of those people who drops 15 grand on their credit card to go experience KONA and come back broke.
Yeah.
And Hayden will be 3, which will be pretty neat. He'll be actually able to experience the beach and enjoy himself. And that's kind of where I'm at. Got to hop on the trainer for some focus over the winter and see if I can improve on my bike.
Yeah. Okay. Several things just popped into my head there. One was, I think I'm a prototypical example of somebody who underestimates what it takes to get to KONA, and I'm finally starting to realize that. I thought, and I still think it's definitely possible for me, but you hear about these people that, the first time they went, they qualified for KONA and all that. And I just wonder a lot of times, I bet these people have some kind of endurance background, for the most part, right? It's like, what's it going to take to really get up to that level? So in your case, a 70.3 might be a lot more manageable than actually getting to full KONA qualifying distance. I mean, I just, you know what I'm talking about here?
It's for me, where I am in kind of my life cycle as a triathlete, is the 70.3 distance. I'm a very strong swimmer. I'm a really solid runner, but I can't really use those because after I build a lead in the swim, I'll lose it on the bike, and then the run, I'm playing catch up from the bike because over 112 miles, biking is my weakness, and I can't hide it. Over a 70.3 distance, if I choose the course correctly, the swim is a lot more important, and the performance increase that I would need to become competitive versus 56 miles versus 112, it's a lot more manageable. Over this time frame, and it's just and when I do get to KONA, I don't want it to be like the end of my career either. Like, I see a lot of people who qualify, and then it's like they talk about it obviously the whole year before they go, and then they can't quit talking about it afterwards. Like, well, what about next year? What if you don't qualify? Is it going to be like a bummer or a down year? And so really my goal for next year is just to become a better all-around triathlete, which for me means really focusing on cycling. There is no real off season. It's I think a lot of people coin that term. Oh, it's the off season. Forget the swim. Just do some weight training and some cycling and running, and be good to go. Now, I totally disagree with that, but if you're looking at an early season 70.3, like I know you and I are in May, that's not that far away.
No.
And then the next thing you know, if you wait till January, you've fattened up and gotten and lost a lot of fitness over the holidays. You've gained 10 pounds and you're not as fit. Well, you're looking at 5 months before you can be ready to go. So you're playing more catch up than you actually are improving. I think time off is important. It's just not. It doesn't need to be taken advantage of.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point you brought up about the full distance and the cycling. I was talking to, my boy Richter the other day, who's a really good cyclist, and he was telling me that in his estimation, he thinks the fulls are all about the bike, and it was because of that reason. He says because if you don't have a bike, you can't do it. You can't get to Kona without a bike, without a strong bike at that distance, because you'll either get off the bike too tired or you'll never be able to stay in the race.
Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So that's why I think in a lot of ways, like I was talking to Jim about this last night with my background in athletics, whether it be, baseball and shit like that, hockey a little bit, but it wasn't really endurance background. But so I have this ability to turn that corner and be pretty successful, but I don't get to the top of the top. I get to the top of the middle, pretty I got there pretty easily. But the difference between getting from top 25 in my age group to top 5 is a major difference.
Big jump.
Yeah, so that's where that off season comes in too. It's like, I can pick up, Olympic bike shape or half bike shape, and like you said, I can almost hide it because I'm a natural mountain biker and cyclist. I'm okay at it, and I can stick in the pack, pretty well at that half distance, but at the full distance, no chance. And it's like with swimming, you just have that natural ability to pick that up a lot quicker. So there's certain things that, I think that you gotta really focus hard in the off season to take advantage of that lost time, so to speak. In certain areas, like if you don't have any kind of history with something, you need to, make up time.
Yep, totally.
So you said something about you don't want Kona to be your last goal, and that's what kind of goes into this next thing about, like you're talking about, there's a lot more Ironman now, and it seems like there's this big frenzy of people signing up for Ironman just to say they're signed up. It's almost like the year of being signed up is the whole thing, and then the race is secondary, and actually finishing is secondary in some cases, especially since what we saw at Chattanooga, where 30% either didn't start or didn't finish or something like that.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, and I understand it because when I signed up, it was all I fucking talked about, It's like, it was the biggest,
absolutely.
so I get it, but you wonder what's going on in the big scope of things, if this has just become a big bucket list thing for everybody, or it becomes something that people really want to improve their life and, selves.
Yeah, man, I think actually I was reading something the other day where ultra marathons are now the new Ironman. Like it said, because that's how watered down the Ironman scene has become. And I've always been a proponent of anybody tells me, oh well, that's just crazy. I don't see how you do that. Honestly, anybody can do it. I mean, I fully believe that anybody, no matter where, whatever walk of life you come from, anybody can do it. It's just if you really want to. Do you want to actually do it, or do you want to do it as a sport, or do you want to do it as a bucket list event that you say? Because in all reality, you're right. For not anymore, but 3 or 4 years ago, you had to sign up at noon the day after an Ironman in order to do it 364 days away.
Yeah.
So honestly, the lure of signing up is it's very grand. You get to brag for 364 days that you're training for an Ironman, or that you're going to do an Ironman, and people think you're crazy, and people think that you're nuts, and people just are in awe that you even thought about doing it, when really all you did was just pay $850 to, for some people, totally void out the other existing parts of their life that are good, to either train for it, or not really take it seriously, And then when the day comes, you either don't start because you're injured, or you don't finish because you didn't do enough, you didn't take it seriously enough.
Yeah.
And, in the day and age we live in, is it a crime to not finish an Ironman? Absolutely not. But everybody's more apt to give you a pat on the back and a good old go than, than a, hey man, I saw you didn't finish. Did you not take it seriously enough? Why didn't you finish?
Yeah.
I think it's difficult, but it's something that I think, people enjoy. Like I said, they enjoy the 364 days. They just don't prepare for the one day. And I think that's what separates a lot of people who just give up, like in Chattanooga, that give up and just decide, I'm just going to DNF it. I've got plenty of excuses. This run course is legendary, and it's 100 degrees, and it's the hardest race ever.
Yeah.
Kona's going to feel like a cool down.
Yeah.
So I just think that's things need to be approached differently for certain people. But like I said, it's a one and done for some people, and that's absolutely okay.
Yeah, and I think there's it's sort of a sign of the times. I'm gonna just make a quick analogy because it's like, the Cubs are in the World Series, and now there's a zillion Cub fans coming out of the woodwork, of course. And then
I just noticed that on my Twitter feed. I was like, oh, I didn't know how many Cubs fans I followed.
Yeah, and now I heard in Wrigleyville the like some of the famous bars down there, the Cubby Bear is charging $100 to get in tonight, and there was a line at 7 o'clock in the morning to line up to get in the bar today, and they're charging not that place, but some bars are charging $1,000 for a seat at the bar for the game tonight.
Wow.
Like, and it's like, I just think it's part of the society. It's like, Ironman, that $850 used to be a lot of money. Now people are just dropping credit cards, or they're making more money now, and it's no big deal, and everybody's starting to do it. You're starting to see your friends do it. It's like, I could do that, and I do believe everybody can do it like you. And one of the things that has shocked me after now that I've done a few is really how easy it is to finish. Like just finish. I don't mean like, super easy, but like if you really put in some effort in training, you should be able to figure out how to finish. And that's why I think there's a divide between kind of the older camp and this influx of new one and done bucket listers, and it just becomes like it is watering down the sport. And that's why I wanted to ask you is, do you think that, I know it'll never happen because it's just about money, but I think it might be better maybe for Ironman to make people do a 70.3 to qualify for a full,
Yeah, I think that I don't even think that they need to do that, because I think people feel like they have to anyway. I think that's part of their brand. Like if you sign up for an Ironman, I would probably say 8 out of 10 athletes choose to do an Ironman 70.3 instead of just a regular half distance Ironman.
8 out of 10, so 80%, you think?
Oh, I would say at least 80%.
Out of those 20%, I bet there's, out of those people that don't finish, I bet the high percentage of them are those 20%ers. No, maybe not. I'd like to see.
I'm saying that they would pick a specific Ironman branded race to do, versus a regular 70.3. They will travel 6 years. So they'll travel 6 hours away to do Muncie 70.3 when they could just drive down to Birmingham and do a 70.3 as well, but just not IM branded. And so I think that people just kind of think that it's the brand that people chase, I guess, more than the distance. But I bet a lot do prep that way. I feel like they feel like they have to conquer that, which honestly, I'm not one of those people that thinks you have to do a 70.3 before you do a full, but it all depends on your mindset, and it depends on how you approach a full. Is it a prerequisite? Not by any means. Is it a bonus? Absolutely. But if you approach training well enough, then at some point you're going to want to race, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. I just know that the first 70.3 that I did, it really kind of woke me up to like, okay, you're thinking you're going to do an Ironman. Yeah, you just did this, and I believed at that time that it was much more attainable, but I still realized how much work I had to do, to get to where I wanted to go to double that distance. So I guess in that sense, I just wonder if yeah, it gets tough, and at Chattanooga it was 195 degrees, and it was definitely in the fall, and people weren't used to training in that heat probably for the most part. So I give them that thing, but at some point you got to make your target goal realistic and not go out there and just crumble on on the bike, let alone the run.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't know. I think you're being a little too. You're definitely a little more compassionate than I am. I mean, I think a late season September. I mean, in Nashville at least, and even here in the Midwest, it's still 90 to 100 degrees in mid-September.
Yeah.
And if you break it down time-wise, if you're giving somebody 17 hours, that's a 2-hour swim and 8-hour bike, and that gives you 7 hours to walk around a marathon. So at some point, it's more about, do you want to finish and put a stamp on actually finishing a goal, or is it, okay, you know what? I realize that my time goal isn't necessarily reachable, so I'm just going to bag it. I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to give up and call it a wash. That was one of the things I had to cover with one of the athletes that I had doing Chattanooga. I knew she was going to be in much better shape fitness-wise than she was the previous year, so she wanted to improve. The conditions were much more difficult than they were the previous year. And so for her, I knew that the first thing I had to cover for her when she finished was, where did you place overall against the field?
Uh-huh.
Last year she placed 830th, I think, against the field with like an 11:30, and this year with a 12-hour, she was 420 something. So She cut in half where she was overall, but her time got slower. So it's not necessarily about looking at the time; it's about how you did as an individual athlete against the field of other individual athletes. Not obsessed with, staring at your speedometer, staring at your Garmin. I've kept these paces in training. You had it. That's how it was in Louisville when we did it 3 years ago. You had to totally take all of your previous expectations in training and basically just throw them out the window. And you had to survive, and you had to be smart. And if you finished, then you should give yourself a pat on the back because you were able to be resilient enough and, in my opinion, humble enough to accept the circumstances and the conditions that the day gave you and still do your best and not equate success with the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important lesson for a lot of triathletes to learn.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I still haven't learned it,
Yeah, you suck at that.
I really do. So I guess in a way I understand how that happens to people, but at Louisville when it was that hot, I still remember like my goal was to get off the bike under 5 hours, and I did like 5:59, or 6 hours, and I did 5:59. It was like, and in the long run that probably just fried me,
Yeah.
because my run fell apart instantly. So yeah, but then I had to figure out how I was going to get there, and that was kind of cool. How am I going to make this happen? And it was a run walk for the second half. So
yeah.
Let's talk about the infiltration of Ironman races now, and how many more there are, and is that good or is that bad, or does it matter, or what do you think?
No, I covered this loosely in the blog post earlier this week, that I think it's a good thing. A lot of people will complain and moan that, it's oversaturation and Ironman's killing the small race management organizations, and I feel sorry for those companies that put on races that are getting swallowed up. On the other hand, if there were that many people complaining about them, they would still be around, because people would choose to do them over an Ironman branded race. And also, you got to also think about the race directors and companies that have had Ironman come in and purchase their races.
Mm-hmm.
and they purchase them for a substantial amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does to, for those race directors and those race management companies that work so hard to build a product that is so good that Ironman says, all right, we don't want to compete against this. We're going to buy it, and you can still run it. We'll just take over with the branding and the logo, and it'll be an Ironman race. I mean, it's common. It happens, and that's all the time. Beach to Battleship is a great example. Maybe we'll cover that later because that was a total debacle.
Yeah.
But I think that it's I don't see a problem with it. I'm I guess maybe the minority, but I think giving people longer windows to sign up for the full distance is a good thing.
Yeah.
Instead of rushing to do it, I think the giving people a larger pond to fish in, or just simply waiting. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with waiting to do a full in October. One of the beautiful things about Louisville now is I can tell some of my athletes, if you want to do a full next year, don't decide right now. See what the off season, your technical off season looks like.
Mm-hmm.
See what the early part of the year looks like. See what your life circumstances are. If you want to end up doing one, Louisville's going to be open. Chattanooga might be open. A couple, Coeur d'Alene will be open. Boulder will probably be open. Like, you just don't have to rush anymore. You don't have to sacrifice or predict, how your life is going to go a year in advance. You can just kind of go with it and see what happens. And I think that's good, for people to have that kind of flexibility.
I think it is too. Now that you say, I mean, I think ultimately that was the biggest bummer feeling I had when they moved Louisville out of August, was that I knew that was going to be a race that was always open, and now it appears that it's going to be open even in October. So, I guess that's the hardest part for me, is to trust the fact that now these races are starting to stay open, and that is a good thing, because that's the last thing you want to do, is try and get a few of your friends, or 3 or 4 or 5 people, all on the same page, all committed on the same day to sign up for a race in a year in advance. So that is kind of cool, because it is nice to be able to sit back and even with you, like, I haven't signed up for a full next year either, and I may not, but if there's some open and I'm feeling the groove, then it'd be kind of cool to sign up in May.
Yeah, and still have plenty of time, to get ready for it. That's just and I always tell people. Even I was covering this with one of my athletes, Blake, who was talking about doing a full Ironman, next year, and then already thinking about 2018. And I was like, well, remember it used to be, well, if you did a late season Ironman, and I think you dealt with this when you did Wisconsin the first year, was that you had to sign up for your second one before you even finished the first.
Yeah.
It's like what kind of rationale does that? It just doesn't make sense. Who even says you're going to like the experience? And then let's say you do sign up for your second one, you do the first one and you hate it, and now you feel stuck.
Yeah.
And now you're going to end up hating a sport you were meant to appreciate and love.
Yeah.
It just puts too much pressure. And it's just, and even if you sign up with 5 people, like, we had 5 people sign up for Chattanooga, I think, last year. I didn't do Chattanooga. The chances of all 4 or 5 of us doing it and being happy and being good when we got there is almost zero. And so I find it much more. I really enjoyed this year having everybody kind of have theirs on a different day and a different time, and be able to kind of root for people from a distance, knowing that hopefully that kind of fell into their their cycle of the year at a good time to where they could actually enjoy it. But I know you haven't signed up for one next year. I'm not signing up, and I am looking forward to not participating in a full next year. Absolutely.
Yeah, we touched on the off season. What else were you going to say about the off season? Like, what are your thoughts right now for people?
Yeah, it is to not. I think you should set yourself up in a manner to where you're doing things you enjoy, but letting yourself go. And if you really are looking at, kind of breaking through some previous, barriers that you had, right now is the time to get to work. You don't want to start back from scratch again. And that's what you see a lot of people do. And, every time I hear somebody, whether it's an article or an online forum or a coach say, just don't worry about the swim. Just do other things that better return on investment, over the winter. Well, then good luck and congratulations on continuing to be a terrible swimmer, because swimming is one of those. It is the hardest of all three to make huge gains because it's such a technical sport, and you just continuous. There is no magic pill. There is no ramp up. It's just more time and more time and more time. I'm a natural swimmer. I swam year-round growing up, and it still takes me a while to get it back, and then I have to work hard. So and I've gone spans where I've taken too much time off, and that's one of my goals this year is to not. I'm going back to technique and strength during the winter and the fall. I'm not going to do tons of yardage. A lot of thousand, 4,000 or 5,000s, but I'm going to work on the technical aspect and keep the form, and then slowly build. But I'm definitely not going to give it up. And that's just one of those things that people just. I honestly think people don't approach the sport of triathlon as a three sport. They approach it as a bike and a run, and just see if I can just get through the swim, and then they wonder why they can't bike or run as well as they want to when it all starts at the beginning.
Yeah, and that I know. Ever since I got into this stuff, that was always the thing. Was like, the swim is only hour and a half or whatever, somewhere in between your whole race. Doesn't really matter, but this year was a prime example for me. I worked really hard on my swim, and then I didn't get to the point where I trusted it enough on race day to actually go out and get out in front of the group. Because, of course, Wisconsin was a mass start, so the whole thing was clear water. That's how you swim fast in that race. I mean, I swam really well, but my contact percentage was way up there, and it was because I didn't get out in front, and I ended up in the largest portion of swimmers throughout the whole race. So the contact level was exceedingly high, and not only does that slow you down, it wears you down because you're starting and stopping a lot and things like that. So I totally agree. I think people they say the swim doesn't matter, but what it does matter, it matters. It's just it matters in the race big time, because you either, like I said, get caught up in that pack and that slows your whole swim down and wears you out, or you end up in that big pack of bikes too. You know what I mean? It's almost like it's like it's not a sprint really, but the swim has to be something that you kind of use to get in good position to have a good race,
Yep.
And it's easy to kind of just look at the time spent in the water, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah, it's just a big, there's maybe I'll link this on the next podcast, but there was a study that I was reading online on one of the PubMed journals, and it was a study that the conclusions were that arm fatigue actually led to an increased perception of leg fatigue. More than, it was in terms of cycling, which is a big deal, obviously, when it comes to triathlon, is that if you have poor arm fitness and you're going to be in your aero bars for 56 miles and your arms are already hurting and tired, well, the perceived exertion level for your legs is going to be actually much higher versus what's actually, reality, and that you're actually already tired. It's still, people forget, it's still all one continuous energy system, the same one. And if you tax half of it, you don't just get to give up and just leave that back in T1. You carry that with you on the bike.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately going to affect it. And people just don't, they either don't care, or they don't take it seriously enough, or they just would be just fine just, kind of leaving it as is. But, this is a great time of year to actually work on your swim.
Yeah. That's a great point, because what do people say most of the time is like, yeah, that's why triathletes typically don't kick that often in the water is because you want to save your legs, but you're happy burning your arms, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess that really points back to the whole idea that your swim better be balanced just like the rest of your race. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
it's all about creating the most and efficient energy out of your stroke or your pedal or your swim or your run. It's like everything about that race to me, the more I learn about it, is just you don't want to cook any part of your body, and you need your other parts of your body to supplement, so that doesn't happen.
Yep,
So
100%.
yeah, it's like the old adage that for you need your core to be really strong for the run, but running doesn't necessarily build your core.
Exactly. Yep.
So isn't it sort of, that's why it's like I know that swimming builds your core, and like, but is it strong enough? It's like I really felt like I didn't run a whole lot this year, but I swam a lot more, and I felt like that really helped my run. So it's like, I don't know, it all ties together, and I think you're right to kind of downplay any of the three is a big mistake.
Yeah, it definitely. Well, it's three sports, not two.
Yeah, and they are, it's cross train, and they impact each other beautifully, really. I mean, it's kind of a beautiful sport in that regard, because it's first of all, it's possible to do all that in one day, and secondly, it really, I thought after I started as quote unquote a runner 5 years ago, and running was just not like running by itself destroyed me as a body. It
Oh
was
yeah, absolutely.
it was all I was doing for about the first 6 months of my get back into shape plan, and by the end of that 6 months, I was like, God, this is really what I wanted to do. I mean, I was limping all the time. I was just, my upper body was tense. Everything was just not. There was no fluidity or anything going on. I felt like completely a lot thinner, but I felt like my body had gone through war. Really,
No, it's true. Yeah, I mean, it's totally true. I mean, we talked. I mean, yeah, I used that analogy. I'll use it again about the pieces to a puzzle. But that's why I love the sport so much. Is that it is three. It is one. It's a sport, but it's so many different elements.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's your core, whether it's you choose or choose not to do weight training, swimming, biking, running, how all those energy systems work. Together, how they combat each other. How you have to be careful during specific cycles. Like if you want to do a big bike focus, can you or can you not run a lot?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're going to do a big run focus, is it going to hurt? So you're always trying to piece together the puzzle that's going to eventually kind of put together your perfect race. And with having, with so many weaknesses and areas for improvement, it's a give a little, take a little, push here, don't push it, push there, take advantage of this, maybe don't take advantage of that. And it's there's always tinkering. There's always something to think about and to focus on, and that's what it's such a critically thinking sport, even outside of the actual race, when it comes to training and organizing your plan, and it's so much more complex than any other sport that I know of.
Yeah, yeah. I was recently talking to a friend who is a triathlete, but he's training for a marathon, and he's been running silly amounts, like almost daily for a long time. And I saw him, he's got a race coming up in 2 weeks, and he said his plantar fasciitis in his foot is just killing him. It's just like incredible. And I had it once, and he said, well, how'd you get over it? And I said, well, honestly, I just think it was when I got into triathlon and I started cross training, because I was running so much and beating up the same muscles and repeating the same movement so often that it just got strained and inflamed, and it's not going to necessarily go away, doing the same thing, So it's like,
Yeah.
how do you build different parts of those muscles, or yeah, it's the whole system in place. So yeah, that's I just love that, because I could, I really like the swim talk, because I really do think that is just like it's almost like the overall bodybuilder
Mm-hmm.
for the sport. And it again, it's like, well, it's only an hour, but nah, it's so much more than that.
No, it's only 2 hours for most people, and it doesn't have to be. It can only be an hour and a half, and it's just it's the scariest. It is the both the scariest part of the event for most people in terms of anxiety with open water and swimming with a big group of people and being in the middle of a huge mass of water, and if you need help, having to find somebody, it's a panic attack. It's that's the most anxiety driven part of the sport, and the same part when you're training, it is what I believe it is the hardest one of the three sports to push yourself hard enough, because when you get anaerobic swimming,
Mm-hmm.
for me it hurts way just so much more than a bike interval or run interval, and you can't stop. I mean, you can stop in the middle of the pool if you want to, but if you want to finish your interval or your set and be in that much pain and be that out of gas and out of breath, it's very uncomfortable, and people just don't like to be that uncomfortable training, but then they are scared to death because they're going to be so uncomfortable during the race. So I think there's just
Well,
it'll always be interesting.
you hit on something really interesting there, because you said, clearly the swim is the most anxiety-ridden part of the triathlon for everybody, and then what's the second most? It's always the bike.
Mm-hmm.
And and most people, like, at least most people say that they could probably do the bike and they couldn't run or do the swim, but most triathletes are little, if any, worried about the run. At least worried in the sense of, like, by then, once they get off the bike, then they'll be like, all right, I got this, kind of thing. Because they'll figure out a way to walk it or run it. It's just not scary. And it's not scary like the bike, because you can get hurt and, things can happen. So I wonder if, in some ways, most triathletes don't work hard enough in the swim or the bike. And it's those two areas that they need to get over that anxiety. I know that. I mean, for me, it's always the swim, and I try to push it as hard as I can, and I've come a long ways to the point where I'm not really that scared of a swim anymore, but it's still the hardest thing to work at is the things you're not the best at. That's the bottom line a lot of times, because if you bike your ass off, like, to crazy levels, and you're going to be able to run, you know what I mean? Like, at that pace, it's just about leg strength. Everybody thinks that they have to train their run so hard. I mean, if you're talking about top echelon people, yeah, but for most triathletes, to get off that bike, and if your legs are in extreme bike shape, you're going to be able to run, that marathon.
Yep.
So I guess we can kind of finish it up on the quick discussion of all these races getting shortened and everything. And what do you think about that? I wrote a piece about how I think that it's like you pay Ironman for a full triathlon, and then you end up getting a half or a truncated version of that. I feel like that's they're not delivering the product that people bought. So I feel like that they should be going a little bit further in their hey, buyer beware. Or is it just going to be buyer beware all the time, or are they going to try and build a relationship with these people that they fucked over?
I don't think they actually worry about it. I mean, honestly, I think because they are the big man on the block.
Mm-hmm.
They literally have no competition. Rev 3, fail.
Mm-hmm.
Challenge USA, fail.
Mm-hmm.
Tough Man is actually kind of slowly sneaking up, but the smartest thing they've done is they absolutely want no competition with Ironman. They focus on Olympic distance and half distance,
yeah,
which I think is great. I think we actually talked about that a couple of years ago with Rev.
Yeah,
if they would just give up the whole Ironman thing and just go for Olympic distance and halves, they'd have a better shot. But I think people are always going to want to sign up. But I think what you're seeing now is that people are becoming, I think it evens itself out because people are becoming more aware of the good races and the bad races. I'll use a couple. Texas, I think, was the biggest fail because it wasn't weather, it was just planning, and they had to end up cutting the bike course short. I think that was the biggest kind of black mark for black eye for Ironman last year. So that race won't sell out again, I don't think, until maybe a month or two before. Boulder, from what I understand, was a complete cluster and a very, very unsafe bike course, which unfortunately there was a fatality this last year. That race won't sell out again. Chattanooga will sell out eventually. It won't until that cycle here at the end of the year where there's Arizona and Florida, which are generally very, very big first-time sign-up events. But even Florida now, with the canceled swim, a year or two ago, it's kind of lost. It's like people are going to start picking the ones where they know there's almost no shot of it being shortened or of it being, a detour or something. So those are going to start to become less and less, and so the demand for those are going to be higher. Then you got things like Beach to Battleship, where they absolutely could not have controlled the weather. Totally understand it. I'm actually not in the boat of a lot of people. Oh, they should have done. Like, listen, it was a very unfortunate circumstance for the people of that city. But it is, from a scheduling standpoint, we are getting around hurricane season. Or the end of it. So I can kind of see the scheduling difference, which I think, from what rumor mill is, they're going to change the date of the full Ironman Beach to Battleship to April, maybe in 2018, to kind of get out of that window. But I honestly don't think that they really kind of owe people. I think a nice gesture it would be, but when you don't have any competition, you're not trying to smooth anybody over. I think it's good business practice, because I read a couple I was reading the Harvard Business Journal, and they actually said that customer loyalty actually rises when a company messes up and then does their very, very best to make it right.
Yeah.
So if somebody messes up your online order, they totally fuck it up. And they either, on one hand, one of them's like, yeah, well, I'm sorry, it won't happen next time. You're going to go shop for somewhere else. Whereas if they mess up and they go, they reimburse you hand over fist and send you a gift basket, that's building customer loyalty and the brand loyalty that you want. And they're much more likely to never leave because they know that they're either going to get a great product, or if they don't get a great product, you're going to make up for it. But that only applies when you have competition, and Ironman doesn't have any competition. So until people start not going, think about it. Let's round number. Let's say there's 20 Ironmen across the world each year, and I definitely know there's more than that. But just for the sake of the conversation, let's say there's 20. So for every 20 races, we're going to say there's at least, and this is a conservative number, there's at least 300 people who do not start, just don't even show up to the race. That's 6,000 athletes who never ever set foot on the course. Multiply that out by a $750 general fee, and that's $4,500,000 pocket.
Yeah,
with nothing going out. 4.5 million revenue and that's conservative, from the amount of people who don't finish. They just have a stranglehold on the market. But I think accidents happen. This is probably more of an anomaly of a year than anything. But it's hey, at least people can get their trainers out and do a 3-hour spin. I mean, that to me is is the kicker. I mean, that's the saving grace. I didn't see that in the fine print anywhere, but I'm glad that was a kind of amended to the policy.
Well, that was officially not an Ironman sanctioned event, so
Ah, that's a bummer.
yeah.
That's a bummer.
I don't know, dude. That was, I mean, more power to him, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. You're a little nicer than I am, but honestly, it has nothing to do with them actually doing it after the race. It's their motivation for doing it. Like, did they need that bad to be able to kind of, but not really, but maybe call themselves an Ironman? Did they need to fulfill that so bad that they felt that this was the only way, even though it was total horseshit?
Yeah.
But that's what I'd like to ask these people. Like, what in your mind made you think I have to do this, or I can't consider myself this? And if I can't consider myself this, then what the hell else am I going to do?
Yeah.
And just I would love to hear, actually, maybe we can get somebody on the show here in a couple of weeks from somebody who actually did it and ask them, what was your real motivation? Because I'd love to get a tally of how many people were first timers, how many people just did it to support somebody else, how many people did it just because, hey, they always say cycling is great active recovery after a long run, and basically that's what it was. And honestly, for me, if I was hopping on the trainer, I would have calibrated my wheels to 650s and been off in about 2 hours. I would have averaged about 28, 29 miles an hour on that trainer and gotten off. I was talking to CC about that when they talk about getting on the trainer to finish their mileage. Mileage on the trainer is absolutely the most inaccurate measurement you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so inaccurate. So even just the using that number as a final measure is also inaccurate. So there's no way that anybody was going to be exactly 56 more miles.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. It was a 3 hour. At the very least, they should have doubled what their 56-mile time was.
Oh, absolutely. And I thought it was funny that you saw a lot of people posting that the winds were so bad that thank God it wasn't a full course.
Yeah.
Because people would have totally bailed. People would have totally, and I'm right there with you. There is nothing more demoralizing in an Ironman than a headwind.
Yeah.
Nothing. Not hills on the run, not chopping the water, not running up a helix for T1 like in Wisconsin. The most demoralizing and physically debilitating circumstance is a headwind. And it never ceases to amaze me that anytime there's a headwind in a race, for some reason there's always a general consensus that there was a headwind both ways, man.
I know.
There was never a tailwind. It's funny how that works. It's kind of like our grandparents. Yeah, when we used to go to work and school, we had to walk uphill in the snow with no shoes on, uphill both ways.
Hey, listen, dude. That's how it was at Wisconsin. I know that for a fact.
Yeah. I mean, I was there too, man. I'm not sure that's how it went. I'm not sure if it was the same 15-mile-an-hour headwind. It might have been 5-hour headwind for me and just straight up leg fatigue.
Yeah,
some of those climbs. But it's funny how there's always a headwind both times.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works.
Well, yeah, it wasn't always a headwind. Sometimes it was a brisk crosswind when I was going 50 miles an hour down a hill.
Yeah, that's hair raising too. I mean, I had my hands on the brakes. I'm a flat out pansy when it comes to descending, and I even hit like 49 miles an hour, which is like a land speed record for me.
Yeah.
Going downhill, but kudos to the people in the trainer. I can sympathize. When Allie was in the last little bit of pregnancy and our first couple of weeks with Hayden, I was doing 5-hour trainer rides to get ready for Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So I can sympathize with being on there, but there is no way in hell I would have gotten on there after running 26 miles.
I know. I guess
I'd also like to know if anybody who did the trainer ride actually ran the entire 26.
Mm.
That I would like to know that. If anybody actually ran and never walked the marathon that actually got on the trainer.
Yeah, and I want to see somebody post their watts on the trainer too.
I'm guessing they topped out at 110.
Yeah, didn't seem like
or even double digits for some of the lighter weight males and females. That's I don't know about you, but usually when I'm doing a full the last 56 miles, I'm not sitting up with my hands on my hips, texting
on the course.
Yeah, on the course. Yeah, I've done it a few times, but only going downhill to kind of test myself. But
yeah,
I did hear through the grapevine that the Ironman referees were actually going to send out some DNFs to the people they saw with electronic devices on their trainers, because that is not allowed on the course. So if you had your bib number still stuck on your bike and you're listening to this podcast, I would maybe reach out and apologize, because if you made a phone call, if you had somebody hand you some water, I hate to break it to you, man, but you're probably going to have your results removed from the website, and you will no longer be able to call yourself a 70.6er. And it's just it's a reality. So you heard it here first.
That's a tough break, man.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. So, anything else? What do you got going tonight, man?
Tonight, nothing. I'm going to relax at home, and got to get up and work early tomorrow and finish working on. I'm going to nerd out for a little bit on Training Peaks. They launched a new feature for coaches for creating annual plans, and so I'm going to geek out on that for a little while. And I've got an athlete doing the New York Marathon next week, and a couple other people starting to prep for next year, and just keep plugging away.
That sounds good, man. I'm going to walk across the street and watch my local high school team defend their undefeated record.
Oh, Stratford with the big O at the end? That's impressive.
Top 20 in Tennessee, bro.
Really?
Yeah. 9-0, I think.
Man.
I know it.
Was strong.
Yeah, but nobody seems to want to cover them. But we'll be over there.
Well, if you brought Trump or Hillary over there, they'd probably cover it.
Yeah, probably would.
We'll cover politics and religion on the next show.
Yeah, let's stick away from that one for a while.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, buddy. We'll wrap it up.
All right, man. All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, man.
See you later.